Great. So everyone, welcome to it's our fourth meeting for abutters of the Department of Public Health's upcoming Shattuck Hospital project to be open in the former Newton Pavilion building on East Newton Street in 2024. As I mentioned, this is our fourth meeting. We started all the way back in April. I think we last met in August. And tonight we're going to follow the usual format, which is to say that the state team and their construction and design consultants would begin with a brief presentation. And I'd ask everybody just to let them walk us through their presentation, which is going to speak to a couple of really important issues that I know are important to people. And then we will take questions and comments. And just as usual, I'd ask people to limit their questions and comments to 2 minutes initially, or put them in the chat. That way everybody can be heard in a timely fashion. And I know some people may have more comments or questions than can fit into 2 minutes. That's fine. I'll come back to you. I promise we'll do as many rounds as necessary for everybody to be fully heard and to get their questions answered. But I just want to make sure that everybody gets a chance, who wants to, gets a chance to participate sooner rather than later. So with that, I'm just going to turn it over to Asya to introduce her team and start the presentation.
Thank you so much, David. Hi, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Asya Rosenthal. I am the Deputy Chief of Staff at the Executive Office of Health and Human Services. We are the umbrella organization overseeing this project with DPH and our partner agencies. I won't go through all of the names on this list, as I know that we have been a familiar face in the past few meetings. I do want to call out, most of you should be aware of this, but Frank Doyle, who used to be the liaison, has retired. In his place, I will be Point from EHS. We also have Jen Burrell, who's the Deputy Commissioner at the Department of Public Health, and Rachel Hunt, who's the Project Manager from the Department of Public Health. I'd also like to introduce 2 new members of our team, and that is Joe Nolan and Meg Langley from City Point Partners. So City Point Partners is a woman-owned business. It's a Boston-based firm, and they provide construction services. We heard very clearly from our last meeting that we want to continually improve communications and outreach with this group and with our community liaisons. So that is why we've asked City Point Partners to join our team. They manage communications on lots of different construction projects, and their goal is to provide clear and consistent information on this project and to help mitigate impacts as we work to complete this. They'll work to update websites, provide real-time construction advisories, and it's just going to be another tool to improve communications. We want to make sure that we're being responsive to all of you. Next slide, Meg. So today's objectives, we are going to focus on 2 major topics. One is the corrections van parking, and the other is the construction coordination and construction timeline, specifically on impacts to the alley over the coming year or so. As always, we would like to continue to build a trusting, respectful, and transparent relationship and review and respond to your comments. One other thing that we heard from you loud and clear last time is you do not need to see all of the background on the project to start. So we're just going to dive right on into our 2 main issues and leave as much time for questions, comments, and concerns at the end of this presentation. If it's possible, please hold questions until the end. But if something does come up, please put your comment in the chat or raise your hand, and I'll try to get to that as we're going through. And next slide, Meg. Thank you. So we want to provide an update on the van parking. And before diving into the final layout, we first want to share the operating procedures, which I know many of you have been asking for the vans. And we hope that this will address some of your concerns. So DOC vans are unmarked, and they transport patients to hospitals across the state using established protocols successfully. The Newton Pavilion will receive a small number of inmates daily who require services beyond the health services of the correctional facilities where they live. When a specific need for medical care arises, a team of highly trained officers transport that patient. And the #1 goal of this transport is the strict adherence to established policies. We've gone over this with you already, but vehicles use a secure entrance to transition patients from the vehicle into the building. That means they will be completely in a secure area when they're leaving the building, leaving the van. Once the patient is secure inside the hospital, officers then drive empty vehicles out of the sally port and park them in approved parking spots. Patients are never unattended, vehicles are never parked with patients inside, and we have confirmed that vehicles will never be idling for longer than the officer needs to do a safety check and then go inside of the hospital. The final piece that I think all of you will be very happy to know is that there is a 24/7 monitored access phone number where there's a live staff person from DOC who is always available to speak with any constituent and address any issues or concerns about vehicles immediately. I know that this has come up in the past of, how would we be able to police somebody if they're idling for 10 minutes? This is the line, and they take this incredibly seriously, and they respond to issues immediately. Next slide, please. So this is going to be fairly disappointing to, I think, the majority of this group, but after evaluating every single option that this group has suggested, every alternative location for parking over the past few months, we do need to maintain the original 10 van parking spaces that will abut the alley. As a reminder, we reviewed the street spots that Frank had previously explored. We've reviewed several alternative parking lots. We've reviewed the possibility of changing operations. We have looked at every single possible option to hear you and address your concerns. We will need to stick with the 10 van spaces, but we're hoping that clear communication about operating procedures will help make this transition easier for all of you. We really did hope to find an alternative. We want to acknowledge that this is something difficult to hear, and we thank you for your continued communication and discussion today. Unfortunately, this is the final option, and we won't be able to review alternatives moving forward. I know this is probably a lot of news for folks. I know that we do want to save questions till the end, but David, if you'd like, I'm happy to give folks a couple of minutes to respond, or we can just keep going.
Now, why don't we give people a chance to respond? Because I think you basically what's said on
Sure.
the van issue.
Sure. David, do you want to call on people, or should I try to monitor what's in the chat?
I'll try to call on them, but if I miss somebody, feel free to interject. So I see Angela, you have your hand raised. So go ahead.
Yes, so you're telling me that this is a final decision after looking all around this entire area, you can't find spaces for these vans. And so it doesn't matter what we say here. It doesn't matter. It's over. That's really disappointing and quite frustrating.
I completely
We don't
understand.
want to live with these vans. That's the bottom line. But I guess it doesn't matter that I could say this till I think that it doesn't matter. This is the plan. This is what's going to happen, and we just have to deal with it. And so that's essentially what you're saying to us today.
So Angela, yes, what I'm saying is that we have reviewed every single option. I see in a chat asking
How
for
is that possible? I do believe there were some spaces that were opened up. I thought on East Newton.
Yep, we looked at both East Newton and Albany Street, and after reviewing with DOC, it does not fit into their safe operating procedures.
Can you explain what doesn't fit into their safe operating procedures?
Yeah, they're safe operating. It's not exactly safe for us here.
So Angela, just to confirm, there will never be patients or inmates in the vans when they're in those parking spaces. So I would hope that safety in that sense is not an issue for you.
I do believe that that there. How many incidences have there been of patients escaping in the previous location of the Shattuck? Can you give me that?
From a DOC van,
yeah, or during this transfer, have there ever been any patient escapes? Because I do believe I read about one or heard one on the news in the last 6 months.
Jen Burrell, I don't know if you want to jump into that, but in my recent memory, not that I'm aware of during the transfer with the vans.
I agree, Asya. I don't, happy to go back and look. Nothing from moving or escaping during transfer. There have been instances where individuals who were residents or patients at the hospital may have left, but not from a transfer, and they weren't necessarily DOC individuals either, but no incidents from transferring from the vans.
And Angela, just to, I'm not sure if I can explain what a sally port is, but
I know what a Sally, I can understand what a Sally port is. I get it. I see it. I understand it. So basically there's no point to talk, like it's over. Why are we having this discussion? It's not a discussion. You've just told us, forget about it. It doesn't matter what you say. This is what we're going to do. So what's the point of this?
It's to inform you of our plan moving forward.
I will, for the record, not happy with this at all. As I'm sure I'm speaking for all of the abutters here. This is unacceptable.
Maria and Cinda, I see your hands up, so I'll call on you next. Let me just ask one question though, and it's Patrick raises it in the chat. Asya, can you speak to why the Department of Corrections asserts that it's unacceptable, that the parking spaces that were secured on East Newton Street are not an acceptable solution for them?
Yeah, so I can't actually go into too many specifics because understandably with Department of Corrections, they do have to keep their safety and operations plans fairly close to the chest. But what I can say is having street spots, there's no guarantee at any time that, someone's not going to be double parked there. It's just not a guarantee. So with how closely, as you can see when I walked through, there's very strict and close timing to getting somebody into the Sally Port parking, going right back into the hospital. So it's very important to have dedicated parking spaces that are off of a public street like that.
Right. So I guess, and again, I'll get to you, Maria, in a second, but it seems to me like what you did here was the state has a facility that requires dedicated parking of some form due to this van issue, but they purchased a facility that doesn't actually have any dedicated parking. And now they're attempting to create some in an inappropriate location. That's what it seems like to me. Marie?
Asya, just to follow up on that point, this is all, I mean, when this design was made, it's all on the owner's property, on DCAMM / okay.
Yes, it is.
Right, but there was never any dedicated parking on the property prior to this, other than in the portal.
Because this function hadn't happened before, right?
That's my understanding. Yep.
Well, and to the extent Department of Corrections vans were utilizing the facility, and they were to some degree, because BMC does provide services to the Department of Corrections. They used to park in the little lot is no longer, that apparently is not available. That's where they formerly parked.
And that's where they should park now.
Marie, go ahead.
I think I think that we should have a representative from DOC here to explain to us about the situation. First of all, and I think a lot of us are concerned about the safety aspect of this, but I think most of us are concerned about the health and well-being of our community, of our street, of our neighbors, of people who actually work at BMC and the school, and even your patients. They'll be constantly hearing noise. I mean, just unhealthy noise, and that has to be addressed. It really does have to be addressed. This noise issue is an issue, and it's Boston has been dealing with this increased noise situation, and it is a public health hazard. And I think we have to treat it as that. So if you're thinking of putting 11 moving vans in that tight space, then you have trucks backing up into the loading dock, then you have airplanes going overhead. I mean, it's really untenable. And I think that, Boston, what is the mission statement of Boston Public Health? It's to create a healthy community, right? Keep people healthy and safe. And it's exactly what you're doing is the opposite. It's long range. It's a long range health hazard. And looking out for all these noise issues, it's a big, big deal, and you're not addressing it. And so I think we really have to address that. And I know that Cinda has a lot of concerns about that, and David, and we all do, and you're not addressing that. It's a major issue all day long. We're hearing beeping, beeping, beeping. It is a health hazard. Look at all the health studies about noise. Ongoing, 11 vans backing up, leaving, and so I'm gonna leave it there because a lot of other people, I'm sure, have a lot to say. But
Thank
that
you,
is a
Marie.
major concern.
Thank you, Marie. Obviously, I wish I could control the airplanes and the beeping. We unfortunately don't have control over that, but we do have control
You have
over.
control of the parking spaces.
Sorry, so we do have control over the parking spaces, and I absolutely hear you. What I will say is these vans are unmarked and their mission is to stay kind of as under the radar as possible. So their intent is not to beep and to loudly back up every single time they come in and out. It is to be unnoticeable to the community.
By law, they're not allowed to idle more than 5 minutes.
Exactly. And if you ever catch
Yes, we will call.
any situation, you call that number and they rectify it immediately.
We will call the police as well. That's there, and that is also.
Absolutely. Marie, absolutely. And that's your full right as a constituent and as a tenant there.
So I have another, are any of the designers here for this project? So if we are stuck with this situation, is there a way that you can build a 15-foot wall to contain it so we don't have to see it? We don't have to hear it? You can have a noise abatement process. Let's build a wall. We don't want to see it. It's your stuff. You're making this our issue now. Let's make it your issue. You deal with it. Build a wall. So we don't have to see it. Hear it. Anybody else?
I'm sorry, you said build a wall so you don't have to see and hear what?
The vans. Parking. We're looking outside and have a big parking lot now. Instead of, that was once a nice garden. Are there designers here now that we can address this issue?
So Marie, respectfully, I would love to take that comment, bring it back to our team. We do have another big update that we want to walk through, and I want to leave time for that. I think now that we've made the decision to stick with the 10 van spaces, we can now look into what that means from an operating procedures.
But I think that what you're not hearing is that
I'm hearing you. The noise is just.
No, but we're gonna fight this. The neighborhood is gonna fight this. We're not gonna just sit down. We're gonna get a lawyer. We talked about it already. We're gonna fight it. So why don't you guys open your mind a little bit and think about how this impacts us?
Can we
Let me-
keep
let- let me-
respectful, please? I just want to make sure everyone knows, okay? We have a meeting to get through. We have to hear all sides, and I just want to be
I would love to
very
hear
very
other
sure that we stay
I would love to hear other
stay
people.
clear in our communication. And the only way to stay
Let's-
clear is to, be respectful of each other. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Tony. Let's let Cinda speak and come back to Marie's point in a bit. Cinda?
David, is this meeting specifically for the Shattuck Hospital? Are you going to be addressing other concerns outside of that that are part of your regular Blackstone Square meeting?
No. This meeting.
this is specifically
purely
for this.
dedicated. This is purely an abutters meeting for any concerns around.
Okay,
Shattuck.
good. Okay, can I have just a couple of minutes?
Yes.
I got a
Just please-
statement.
And yeah, please start with 2 or 3, and I promise we'll come back to you because we got George and Patrick also. with their
Okay.
hands raised.
I have how many minutes? 2 or 3 minutes? Can I have 3 minutes?
Yeah, you can have 3.
Okay, thanks. I just want to say it's behind our house, 60 foot away from our house is a huge loading dock. It's been used by BMC. In fact, it's been used since the building was opened in the 1980s. Now we are having to deal with that loading dock being used by the construction company for the Shattuck, which will be continued to be used for the next 2.5 years of construction and will continue to be used continuously once the hospital's open. This results in a fume, and it is resulting in a fume and noise environment for East Brookline Street now, as was the case when BMC owned it. The placement of these correctional vans, this van waiting area, approximately 50 feet from the back of our house, creates additional huge issues for East Brookline Street residents. Additional fumes, noise, pollution occurring from the operation parking of the vans behind our houses, operations parking occurring between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. I checked the decibel range of backup beeps in the correctional transport vans by looking up on the computer. Backup alarms for prison vans, the range was 90 to 110 decibels. As well, the fumes from the back end of the vans, when parked, will be pointed toward our houses. Stated in the Mass Department of Environmental Protection is the noise pollution policy interpretation. According to this interpretation, this proposed parking area will create a nuisance and will be unreasonably interfering with our health and with the comfortable enjoyment of living in our homes. These vans will create two types, I'm almost finished, two types of air pollution for us. Backup beeps ranging in approximately 90 to 110 decibels and exhaust fumes from the vans coming and going down the alley, as well as the exhaust fumes from the engines of the vans running while waiting behind our residents to return the clients to their medical appointments. Seldom do drivers adhere to the no idling signs because of the weather conditions. The Boston Noise Code is, number one, during the hours of 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., any noise louder than 70 decibels is unreasonable except permitted construction. And number two, during the hours of 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., any noise level above 50 decibels is unreasonable. The parking placement of the correctional transport vans is unfair to the community and to the quality and the health that we will be impacted from the environmental sounds and noise. We can't change that loading dock, but it is outrageous to think that you can comfortably, Elisa, and I don't know how comfortable you are to come in here and say you're not going to change it. Well, I'm not so sure that you're not going to be in violation. That doesn't exist now, and I am certain that there's got to be a way of getting in touch with those people who are in charge in terms of the environmental impact that you're going to have on our properties down here. And it's got to be addressed. I don't think what you're doing it's just outrageous.
You speak to the noise impacts, Asya, for someone on the state?
I'm telling you, I'll say it, you can't come in here and nor can DCAMM. Listen, I appreciate the fact is up to this point, I want to have good communications. We want to have good communications. But for you to come in here and tell us, well, this is what we've decided. It is absolutely, absolutely outrageous that you think that you're going to be able to avoid the Boston Noise Code that impacts our community, our community down here. And you know what is so sad? You have, as far as I'm concerned, we were led along to believe things that never happened. And then all at once, you've got these parking spaces and we're talking, and it's terrible. Please, if anybody agrees, please raise your hand and support this, because when it is here for years and years and years, and it just cannot be. You just can't come in here to this community and ignore us and say this is our response. So what do you have to say to that, Asiya? Maybe I didn't pronounce your name right. Because this decibel range mentioned above on the backup alarm far exceeds what is reasonable according to the Boston Noise Code. And I did call down to the environmental agency in Boston today and told her what was happening. And I didn't leave my name, but I got her name, and she says, please get back to me so that I know exactly what that response is.
So, Asya, can you speak to the noise issue?
Thank you, Cinda. First of all, I am happy to connect directly with that office and review our plans and make sure that we're in compliance. I know that DOC has vans at many hospitals throughout the state, and this program has been operating successfully for many years. I can also speak to the fact that the majority, I will get exact numbers at a later meeting, but the majority of the vans will be during regular business hours. They are typically appointments that the hospital sees, and we can continue to look at those operations.
It's unacceptable. It's unacceptable.
I understand and I hear you, Cinda. Thank you.
Let me just ask you, Asia, as a factual matter before we go into George and then Patrick, just to wrap up the noise thing. Is it a fact that the vans all have backing alarms on them?
I will confirm with DOC.
Okay, but it's probably true. Is that correct?
I'm not sure if anyone else on my team can confirm that 100%, but I will confirm with DOC and get back to this group.
Thank you. George, go ahead.
Yeah, Asia, how many of these spaces are usually taken up at one time? You've got 10 spaces. Are we to expect that there is going to be 10 vans there at all times?
So that's a really good question. And I think that goes to what I was just trying to respond to Cinda is we have data and we've been doing analysis both pre-COVID and during COVID. And obviously the vans and the operations that come in and out of the Shattuck now are going to change in an urban environment because we do need to be respectful of the fact that we do not have a full parking lot. And like we have more than 10 van spaces currently at the Shattuck. So we will look at that in more detail and try to come up with a reasonable estimate. But I would say that typically, no, not all 10 van spaces will be taken up on at all hours of the business day.
Okay, I mean, it does seem then if that's the case, then why can't you, if you're going to have 5 or 6 or 7, why can't you, I mean, if you have 5 spaces on East Newton, what's the chances that you're really going to have all of those full? Once in a while, some idiot is going to pull in front and the traffic people won't get to them in time. But most of the time you're going to, and if not, I mean, they can do what everyone else does, which is drive around the block, right? I mean, this is living in the city, it seems to me. My second question is about the special line that you've established. Is that an old line? Is that something that has been functioning? The line that people can call when there's some problem?
I'm sorry,
somebody's
that is a DOC existing line that has been functioning for many years.
Okay, no, I'm just surprised because we've had 3 meetings on this and no one's ever mentioned that before.
And to be perfectly frank, in reviewing these procedures and operations and all of the different alternatives, this is what we've learned from DOC as we have explored every single option. So this is, that was a part of our research of the past since August when we met. I don't think what I'm going to say people are going to feel comfortable with, but I really need to reiterate, we have looked at every single option. We have advocated for reducing those spaces, and this is just what we have to move forward with.
Okay, and my last comment, and then I'm off, is I completely agree with everything Cinda, Maria, and Angela have said, and I think I'm going to agree with what David says and Patrick says too.
Thank you.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So Patrick is next, and then David. Before you ask your question, though, Patrick, I just want to propose something. We're coming up at 6:45. Usually we run 90 minutes. So my suggestion is, after David speaks to his question or concern, let's move to the second issue, which is use of the alley, and then circle back to this van issue again if people want to say more, just so that we have time to get to that second issue, because I realize we're not going to resolve van thing, in the next 50 minutes. But I also want to acknowledge that several people put into the chat that they supported what Cinda had to say. So with that, go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah, and I'll be quick because I think most of these points were made, but I will echo that Cinda's statement was much more eloquent than anything that I'll say. So I'm totally supportive of what she said. I did have a question about the hours because I think in the past, at most in the evening, it's important to understand, I think most of our bedrooms are on that back alley. And at most in the evening, you might have a hearse going down there. You didn't have ambulances or anything of that nature, but there was very little traffic in the evening. On the noise mitigation, I would just, point out again that there's a new equipment yard there as well. And I don't know that if we have an understanding of what the noise levels coming from the equipment yard will be on top of the vans. And again, that green space was a buffer that helped mitigate some of that noise. And then on the parking, it would be great to further understand what options were explored, why they were ruled out. I'm not sure I buy the double parking thing. Having worked for the prisons department, most of that prisoner transport port that you pointed out takes place in the Sally Port. So once they're out of the Sally Port, the secure nature becomes a little bit less important. And to, I think, George's point, if we don't have 10 vans there, they should be able to get a space. And if the vans are being manned, then nobody should be double parking in front of them. So would be great to further understand what the options were that were explored and ruled out, which I don't know that we need to go into it today, but if we could get the statement on that.
Yeah, Patrick, we have the documentation and we're happy to share that with this group. I will say, I don't have the exact specifics on your question about the nighttime bans. I will say we expect very little traffic at night. Of course, I can't say that there will never be a van that comes in if there's an emergency in the middle of the night, but the majority of traffic is during regular business hours.
David, go ahead.
Thanks, David. So I really just want to reiterate what Cinda has said. I think she laid it out really nicely. It is very frustrating to come to this meeting when we, the neighborhood, have been trying to work and build a relationship with our new neighbors here. We've had a good working relationship for years with BMC and have addressed issues and had a strong working relationship. And to come in and as the first sort of action to totally disregard your neighbors and not even make even the slightest effort of trying to meet us part way just starts the relationship off on a really bad foot. With that being said, I agree with the statements George said. I have lived in the South End for a very long time. I was a resident at Boston Medical Center. I was a medical student at BU School of Medicine. There are numerous places where transport vehicles, including ambulances, double park on Albany Street, idle over there, waiting for transports that frequently occur from both of the medical campuses throughout the day. I'm sure that you guys looked into all of these things. I would like, exactly like Patrick had said, to get a better understanding of why those are unacceptable. I'd also like the designers to be here, because one of the issues and things that they really promoted during their first meeting was how they were really trying to make an effort to bring green space into our neighborhood in a very urban, very industrial part of the South End, where there's a lot of research buildings, hospital buildings, parking structures. There's very few spaces of green space. And one of those buffers was that area that's now going to be occupied by the 10 van spaces that you have outlined. And they highlighted how they were going to really transform the front part of the hospital and make it this inviting space with this new green area that you can clearly see at the bottom of the picture there. I don't understand how, when we come back to you guys and ask to preserve the interface between the industrial part of the hospital and where there is green space that actually impacts the residents of the neighborhood, your answer to that is, let's put it in the front of the hospital where the residents, maybe they walk their dogs by in the morning or something of that nature, but rarely will interface with that green space, and instead rip the remaining sort of green space, remaining buffer zone between the loading dock and all the noise that comes with that. And then on top of that, add even further pavement, pollution, noise. So I think this is an opportunity where if you guys want to act in good faith as partners with us in the neighborhood, that we really need to sit down as a group, and I'm happy to join a meeting with you and the design team to really explore how we can maybe reconstruct or redesign that backspace there to give some sort of buffer between our facility, between your facility and our space. And I think there's an opportunity for us to actually make some progress and work there. It may be an added lift for the Shattuck, for DOC, but I think it's a lift that will make this partnership going forward, which is going to be in place for years to come, one that's going to be much more pleasant for everybody. So I love to explore that if there's an opportunity to do that.
Thank you, David. And I appreciate you taking a I understand your frustration, and I appreciate hearing that there's still room for collaboration and discussion. This is where we are right now, but there's always maybe a way to rethink green space. So I will.
So sorry, part of the collaboration and discussion involves it being a two-way discussion, and right now it's a one-way discussion. And so the only way moving forward is you guys have to be more transparent with us and more clear, and really work with us, because that's not the case. We spent numerous meetings now. David and George and the two organizations have really worked hard to get these abutter meetings, and we're literally back where we started a year ago or more. And that, despite us coming with numerous options and numerous efforts and trying to think through this so that there's a win-win for both situations. This is not compromise. This is like dictatorship. This is laying down a unilateral approach, and that's not the way we can move forward.
Thank you, David. All right, let's move on to the second issue, which is the alley access. And I'll see if you can walk us through that and explain that. And then again, if we at the end we could circle back briefly to the van issue if people want.
Sure thing. I'm actually going to turn this over to Jason.
Let me just unmute. Hi everyone. My name is Jason Iacovelli. I'm with Gilbane. I think I've met most of you on a couple of occasions, maybe if it's not on site, but through these meetings. So we're the construction manager for DCAMM for the project. And I want to talk to you a little bit about our upcoming logistics, some of the challenges and what's going to happen with respect to the alley passageway in the back of the building, or to your backyards and our north elevation of the building. So before I get into some of the specifics, everything that I'm about to present to you and kind of talk about is all focused solely around public safety and protection in the area and how it relates to the physical construction that has to happen. So on this first slide, one of the things that we need to do, and we're going to attack this alley in two different pieces, is from April through June of this year, there's in that back area that's clouded in yellow, where it says demo, right below where it says April through June, there's an existing loading dock in there, and we have to remove that loading dock and do some other construction work in that area. In order to do that safely, we're going to put up a construction fence where you see that kind of segmented red line with little circles, which will permit one-way access only along that alley passageway out to Albany Street. We will our plan is to have a pedestrian pathway. It's really hard to show on this drawing, but there's a little arrow pointing to it so that if somebody needed to walk through and get to that back parking lot or the dumpsters, they would be able to. We are going to take a couple of spaces. We have to encroach on that to safely do the work. Some of the work that's actually going to happen, and it's in the yellow block in the middle, we are going to be, like I said, demoing the existing loading dock in the back of that, in the back corner. There'll be excavation going on, which will have large excavators in that area, or actually rather smaller ones to fit in a smaller footprint, I should say. Putting in some foundations that include formwork and concrete, reinforcing steel, and then finishing that entire area. And we feel we can do that through April and June of this year. So as the weather starts to break, we will get at that first. So the biggest takeaway here is that it is one-way access only during that time frame to Albany Street back and forth. So if you want to go to the next slide for me. So this is where it gets a little bit more intense with the work that has to be performed. So starting immediately after the work in that northwest corner that I just explained, which will be in June, we're going to begin the work in the entire alley and along the facade of the building, which is the elevation that you look at, we call it the facade, which will require that alley passageway to be closed for this duration, which would be June 2022, so this year, through May of next year. So during that time, we're going to have installed, and you can see again that red segmented line with the circles, a temporary fence in that area, which will have a passageway, and there's a little rendering, the best we could kind of put together in the bottom left corner, depicting how that would look. The alley is very narrow as it is already. It's as narrow as just over 12 feet in some areas, and it's actually depicted pretty well with the little tire tracks in the snow there. But that passageway will be installed. The fence will not have the Jersey barriers similar to the rest of the fence that we currently have installed on the property, because it just encroaches more on both sides of it. So we're going to have a temporary construction fence that will be able to be manipulated as we move down the work in the alley. But that passageway will allow for a pedestrian to exit an emergency out to the west. And this is also very important. There will be no, if you walk down that area, there will be no access to Albany Street from that alley passageway. The pedestrian walkway will go out to that existing parking lot where the dumpsters are, to the northwest corner there, which is near the parking garage on that left-hand side. So,
God forbid there's a fire. What's
the fire?
God forbid it's the fire or something. What is
that has been reviewed with the code, and the fire lane access, the fire way access is East Brookline and Albany. That road is too narrow and doesn't even meet the requirements for the state or as an emergency fire alley lane, and that's why it is not called that. It's actually a passageway. So if there is an emergency and you have to get out, you would be able to go along that fence line. That's what I was explaining, and to walk over, like looking at the screen, over to the left-hand side to exit through that parking lot.
Jason, I apologize. This is Meg. Can you see I'm trying to laser point along the.
I can't with a laser. I'm sorry, but it's right above the words.
I wasn't sure if you could see, you could see on what I
No,
screen. Okay.
I can't. So let me just talk a little bit about the work that's going on in there and why this has to happen. And like I said, it's all focused around public protection and safety. The blue, everything that's highlighted in blue is the actual street and the pavement. And there is an incredible amount of underground utility work that will be going on in that roadway. There'll be new services coming off of Albany Street that go down and then turn into a 90-degree into the building, along with drainage work that goes along the entire tall wall, that tall planter wall that you look at, that's concrete. That'll all be cleaned and washed when it's done, but that goes along that wall, along with some catch basin work. But some of that work in that street and that roadway is as deep as 14 feet, and it is pretty narrow. So really, there is it just presents so many safety risks that it necessitates the closure until we complete the work. We did segment it where we get the end of the building work done first, which keeps it open one way instead of doing it all at the same time. Thought that would be a good idea to look at it that way, to do it in two sections. The other thing that we looked at and we are planning on doing is we are putting a new facade or skin on the building, similar to what they did with the BU Dental building. It's going to have metal panels, masonry, new windows. Everything that you see in purple there is that elevation, that's that wall line. So that work will be ongoing, as well as the utility and site work. The site work should finish a little sooner, but we are stacking that work together so that we can get it done as quick as possible. Otherwise, it would just prolong how long we would be in there. So I explained some of the work that would be done in the street. So you'll have excavators in there and trucks and just a lot of underground equipment, people laying down the drainage pipe and addressing the manholes, gas piping is going in. The work on the facade, what you'll see is a whole series of staging on the building. Most of it, it's not going to be like the staging that you saw if you were on East Newton Street. It's not that type of pipe staging. The majority of it will probably be swing staging, which is hung from the top of the roof down. There'll be some boom lifts that will feed the material and allow the craftsmen to install the metal panels and the windows. We're going to try to do as much of the window installation, everything from the inside as we possibly can. But there will be deliveries to bring the product in, to give it to the men and women that are on the staging doing the work. So it's going to be very busy for that period of time. A lot of work going on concurrently on both sides. In order to help minimize how long this actually had to stay closed from, we're going to try to attack the facade from both ends, working towards the middle. The building is very segmented, so I think it allows us that opportunity to do that, to help keep the duration down as much as possible. So, like I said, and what I thought was important to put on the slide is the high hazard risk activities that are happening in there, the amount of equipment that will be in that area, the deep excavations with the utility work. It really it necessitates the closure during that period to get the work complete. So that's pretty much it. I know there's also a note. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Jason, somebody in the chat has asked the obvious question.
Sure.
So people are losing access to their parking.
Yes. So they will. There will be no access, with the exception of that walkway that you can see in the bottom left, with that on the other side of that fence. And that fence will have to be manipulated a little bit here and there as we move down. Couple of the catch basins are very close to one side versus the other. It's not in a straight line. So we may have to kind of move that fence for that day and then move it back at night. But the idea is to keep it all in one line. The DCAMM, I know, is exploring alternative parking. And I know they are, like it says right in there, they are still working out the specifics for what that will be and look like.
Jason, if I may, the first step of that is understanding from all of you, which we will be working with you, is what are the current spots, who has a car there, not a spot. We just need to understand the landscape first.
We use the prisoner transport spaces.
I'm sorry, Patrick, can you repeat that?
That was sarcasm, sorry.
I heard it. I got it.
Asya, can you when you and I talked preliminarily yesterday, you represented to me what the state was prepared to do with regard to alternative parking. Can you say can you describe that?
Yeah, we are looking into providing parking as close to your buildings as possible, compensated by the state. Just need to understand the landscape first before we can figure out the specifics.
Did I understand? I thought I understood that. I understood that the site of the alternative parking had not yet been secured, but I thought it was the case that you were committed that the state was going to secure alternative parking and pay for it. For the duration. Is that correct?
So yes, we can commit to that. The question is how many spaces and what that looks like, but yes, we are committed to providing alternative parking.
And you characterize the preferred alternative as the doctor's office building garage, correct?
That would be the preferred location, obviously, because it is so close. The concern there is that it is changing ownership. So we need to look into that in more detail once we understand the number of spots that we're looking for. But that is obviously the preferred location since it's the closest to your buildings.
Okay, so I see, Tony, I'll call on you first, then Angela, you have your hand up too, but just, it seems to me like one of the things that should come out of this conversation or shortly thereafter is I don't think anybody is going to like the idea that they're not going to have access to their parking spaces for a year. But what are people's preferred alternatives? And I assume the doctor's office building, because it's the closest, is the best, but we should try to have at least a little bit of that conversation before we adjourn. Go ahead, Tony.
Thank you, David. So Jason, what I'm trying to say, because I'm pretty surprised that you come onto this meeting and there just seems to be no room to discuss anything. It's like you absolutely know you are going to do this, and that the inconvenience faced by those residents is unfortunate, but why has nobody got a right to argue with this plan? And how can an existing hospital need so much new underground utility work that is going to facilitate this entire area being pulled up? So the blue is just astounding for an existing hospital site. This is a hospital becoming a hospital, so I'm just astounded. But I just want to understand the tone of this presentation is about, this is how it's going to be, and you're going to get alternative parking when people have been using that alley as an easement for decades. So how is it not a two-way conversation?
So I never said it wasn't. I just wanted to present first what our plan was. This is the first time that this group is seeing this.
Yeah,
So, but let me answer the other question. The reason why it's such a vast area right there, one of the biggest things is look at the facade of the building. To put a new skin on that existing structure takes up that entire length. I mean, it is a big task to do in that elevation, in that period. We're committed to it. We're looking at buying materials early to secure everything. Every means possible had to be vetted out to commit to this duration. So that alone is a huge section of work that has to happen. Now, the site work that goes in front of that purple bar which depicts the foundation, there's a lot of drainage work that has to happen. And I can't speak to, because I'm not the designer with a construction manager, we actually perform the construction, but I believe the pipe is deteriorated. And there's other things that have to happen to adjust the frame and grade heights, that those are not holding up. They're old and it needs to be new. It also needs drainage work in that area as well. So like I said, I can't comment, unfortunately, on everything as to why that's there, but I can tell you that the majority of it is deep, because those pipes are deep.
Okay.
The area in the bigger blue area.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
I get that. That's question one as to why it's so expensive. And what about the fact that it's non-negotiable as far as this conversation is? Why is it going to happen this way without, compensating people who are going to be severely impacted by what you're doing on property that they have been using, that they have easement on for decades? So I'm just confused as to the tone and why they have no rights.
I can't comment on the rights, but I can tell you that in order for us to complete our work in that area with those deep excavations in a roadway that's 12 foot 6 inches wide at some of the points, would be impossible not to close that down. You just can't do it. You would not be able to get there. Okay. So even to talk about like a negotiation on it, there's really, in order to complete that work, we would have to not do it.
Okay, what I'm asking is, as a conversation, can you approach this as, what can we do to limit the inconvenience to those properties that are severely impacted by this? Can we just make sure that that is the tone of the presentation? What can we do to complete our project while compensating or somehow making the lives of those residents as I don't know, as easy as possible? So
yeah, Tony, if I can volunteer, Jason.
Sure.
I'm new to this project, right? But we have worked on hundreds of similar projects. This is a really tricky one, Tony, because I mean, construction-wise, Jason's absolutely right. In order to do the cladding on the wall, to do the drainage and utilities that need to be upgraded to support the new hospital for generations, you need to have construction access to go in there and to work on their property. That's their side of it. From your side of it, you're like, I've been parking my car here for however many years. You've come in through this now, and I don't know if you've mentioned the word easement several times. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know anything. But if you have an easement across this property owned by the Commonwealth that is granted in your deed and stuff, that's an issue. But the objective here is like, I don't know if you have children or dogs, or I certainly know you pull around and want to pull your groceries and be the most convenient up. What this objective was is, you're not going to drive around here while they're lifting sheeting up 10 stories and be comfortable, trying to get a flagman to go around the utility holes and get into your parking. It's just the level of construction. There's going to be this impact for a period of time. I know Jason, and let me finish one sec, because nobody's trying to pull anybody's wool over anybody's eyes. It's just that is the reality of the construction that DCAMM and Gilbane by Hart has to perform here. They're trying to from what I understand from meetings prepared for tonight, and I admit I'm new. DCAMM and the Department of Public Health and everything are trying to find a way. For some people, I don't know about your property, I don't know about anybody's property. It's an informal. The access across the DPU property is an informal setup. It's carried on for a lot of years. They're trying to say, look, in order to build this building, make the improvements, and build this facility for the Commonwealth that's been deemed for this location, that there's going to be a substantive impact on you guys. In the long time, they want to make everybody whole. Even in the short time, the objective is to provide alternative parking, which isn't as convenient, but it's safe. And in the long term, try to maintain that relationship so that you have that access to get in and get to the parking spaces long term when this job's all done. So it's not that anybody's trying to lay down an edict. It's just we're trying to work together for our mutual goals, and it's not, nobody's suggesting it's going to be easy. I don't know the legals about who has an easement and who doesn't. If that's the case, that's a different issue.
I think it would be good too to mention the fact that there were alternatives that were looked into, and that ultimately this is what about timing and whatnot, but ultimately this was what was deemed safest.
And the timing, Jason, if this were to go ahead in this, if you tried to do it piecemeal and hopscotch, where some people would be displaced for a period and then other people, and you would then get into a much longer construction schedule. Is that right?
That's absolutely correct. It would probably go closer to 20 months, thereabouts. And people would still be impacted because of where the work has to take place. So it could be 6 months or 8 on one side and even longer on another, depending upon the nature of the work in front of the back of that property line. But absolutely.
Thanks. Angela's had her hand up for a while, so let Angela speak, and then Cinda, and then Marie.
So I'll just go back to the fact that you're acting as if there's a discussion, and you have not. What you're saying is that, many of these people who have been parking here that belongs to their property, that, we just decide, here's the plan, this is the way you have to deal with it. There has been no discussion. You're asking for cooperation. We've been cooperating. We haven't had any communication about this plan till right now. And it sounds like this is it. We've decided this is the way it's going to go. You people that are parking back there, too bad. We're looking into finding parking. Why don't you have a plan already? You should have that all worked out.
Well,
I mean,
Angela,
that just seems so inconsiderate, and just it flies in the space of in the face of, we're cooperating and we need your cooperation.
The objective, though, Angela, is not, and I'll let you go back on, is not to make an edict. I mean, Jason looked, that's why.
Well, you just did. How is there not an edict? What's the alternative?
The alternatives that Jason looked at, and Jason, I'll let you elaborate on the different alternatives you looked at. That's why we're talking about it tonight.
It communicate the alternatives. What it sounds like to us, step us across and put yourself in our place for 1 second. We just get a whole bunch of information that this is what we've decided to do. We're looking into parking, we're inconvenienced here, and we're looking into how we're going to resolve this without a discussion about it. And if you're going to do it that way, then you should have a plan for parking. Looks like you have a lot of problems with finding parking. I think that's so unfair of us to just say, okay, well, we're supposed to just keep taking this. I don't care about your building and what's inconvenience, because you haven't considered, it's as if there's no consideration for any of us here.
It's not a fair consideration, Angela. The fact of the matter is, Jason has spent the last couple of months looking at alternative plans, trying to figure out what is the best and safest way to do it.
Well, present
and as I mentioned before,
it
I don't know. All right,
it didn't come to us that way. I don't care. I'm going to be a little rude, and I'm not a rude person, but it didn't come. If Jason went through all these considerations, then let us know. What comes tonight is, I've gone through all this, and this is what I've decided, and this is what we're going to do.
Right.
And that's unacceptable here.
Thank you, Angela. Before we get to Cinda, yeah, just add something, Angela. I think one of the frustrations here is, as I mentioned at the outset, we started these meetings last April. And it seems to me, at least, that this particular impact, which is to say that the construction might, according to you, necessitate closing the alley, was entirely foreseeable and could have been brought up months ago, which at least would have given people, both you and us, a better chance to try to, figure out alternatives. And yet here it is, it's being presented with, with only 3 months notice, and it's just very frustrating. And I think that's part of why we feel the way we do, or at least many of us. Cinda, go ahead.
I agree with you, David, with what you just said, because it's been a long time since we had a meeting, and finally we got one here today. But there are a couple of things, looking at your plan, a couple of things I'm thinking about some of the neighbors who, and some of the property owners here on this street. In the back, I know for a fact the owner of the building next to me, he rents out these units, and that particular rental behind his property accommodates 2 cars, and he rents those out on a monthly basis to his tenants. So I don't know how you're going to compensate him in terms of, you're going to have to, and I agree, this is really just kind of come out of nowhere. You're going to have to accommodate that, but you're going to have to. It seems to me that if this goes through, if people can't, somehow come up, if they can't come up with something else, that's going to have to come out of your pocket to pay him for the loss of those parking spaces per month for 2 parking spaces. In addition to that, another thing I was thinking about is that because when I go to meetings, I try to factor in to support what the community is going to feel. Now, this isn't going to be an issue for me, but it will be an issue for other people. People who move into the garden level apartments on our street, they move in from the back, and these apartments overturned. They cannot move their furniture in from the front of the building because the 5 steps down to the garden level on East Brookline Street can't accommodate furniture, large pieces of furniture going in. What happens? Some of these garden apartments turn over frequently. How are you going to accommodate apartments, garden level apartments that turn over, and people who are moving in need access to the back in order to move into these places? Have you thought about that? Who's in charge of it? What's his name? For the construction company?
Jason.
Jason.
Yes.
Jason, have you thought about that in terms of these apartments turning over, and how garden level apartments turn over, and how they're going to be able, how will they access moving in?
I did not go over the logistics of how people would be moving in and out, furniture or whatever it may be.
On those garden levels.
Jason,
Jason,
is there an opportunity? We might want to pick this offline, but is there an opportunity to schedule out, if somebody's aware of a move, for the safe operations for them to get in and out of that location on an infrequent basis if somebody does need to move something large in? Or is that not?
It would be, I couldn't necessarily guarantee that, because if let's say where that dot is right now, where the laser is one of those areas, let's say it's that second one in, if we're doing underground utility work that's going to take weeks to complete in that area, I couldn't do it. But if we weren't there and we were down a little further, possibly, but even then, with the work that be going on to the left and right, it would not be safe to do so. We would end up, it just wouldn't be. And that's why it took a long time. We evaluated internally a lot of different areas. You've probably seen us out there measuring the roadway, diagramming where all the property lines were, looking at the utilities, trying to lay them out in the street. Like, it has been an exhausting process to come and try to figure this out, analyzing the depth of the trenches and the width that you have to make those trenches to safely put boxes in there to do that work. A lot went into it. So, plus making sure that we can actually acquire the product, given this, where we stay in this volatile market, to make sure we had our timeline confirmed. And that's why we're presenting this plan now. we always mentioned that there'd be work to be done in this alley. Just how much we had to close it was unknown at that time.
But Jason, to Asia's point though, if a request was made, when that request is made, we can see where we are in the project and what can be done to accommodate. So we don't know, because we don't know if it's going to happen on day 1 or day 200 and where we are in the process. But if there's an opportunity to accommodate that, we would do it. I'm not going to say no.
100%,
right.
We would accommodate any request that we can fulfill.
Yeah.
Okay, it seems to me like, why don't we propose this? And we don't need to figure out the details tonight, but it seems to me that Cinda's highlighted a fact, which is that there are issues beyond even just the lost parking that the alley closure creates, including things like the fact that somebody might not be able to move out consistent with their lease, and a property owner might not be able to rent a place, which is their right as a property owner, that need mitigation, including potentially financial. And we should discuss separately, not right now, what those scenarios look like and how people might be accommodated or made whole.
Yes, we own a parking spot and we own a unit and we rent it, and we are renting our unit with parking assured to the tenant.
Right.
This is unfair and unacceptable. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely insane.
Right. It seems to me you're potentially putting people in violation of their leases, whether they be tenants or owners.
And we'll sue you for it because it's wrong, and you can't just do that. I mean, I have tenants signing new leases now with parking included, and you're going to tell them that they can't park there? They'll sue me, and I'll sue you. There's nothing that's going to be acceptable on this. I'm sorry.
Can I make a request?
You haven't considered the neighborhood, the tenant. You say you're working with us. You're not working with us. You turn down everything. I've been at 5 or 6 of these meetings. You've turned down everything that Lucinda and everybody else has brought up as possible options of, no, that's not going to work for us. Well, this isn't going to work for the tenants. You're disturbing the neighborhood and the property values.
And I also think, to add on that, I think it's really hard to trust in you guys right now, especially after what just happened with the discussion around the parking spaces, to have you come and say, well, we're looking into alternative parking. My sense right now is you're going to come to the next meeting and tell us, well, we looked into it and there's no options, we're sorry, and move forward. I mean, what sort of trust do we have in anything? If you guys knew this was happening, this should already be locked down and there should be a plan in place. Or if you were actually considering your neighbors, you should have invited us to have this discussion, because we know this neighborhood. We know where the parking areas are. We know what are possibilities. Instead, you've come here and you've dictated what you're going to do, how you're going to impact us, without any understanding of how the sort of flow of the neighborhood is, and sort of the impact it has on people's quality of lives. And I have a really strong sense, and I have to go and walk the alleyway. There is no way that can't be a fire hazard, having that alleyway blocked. To say that the only necessary means of addressing a fire in the row of houses on East Brookline Street is via either East Brookline or Albany Street. If someone is unable to get out of the front of their house and they need rescue equipment or rescue personnel, to have to navigate a narrow walkway that sounds like it's going to be squeezed to the edge of our property, that is unacceptable. That is a safety hazard. If someone dies, I can't even imagine the impact that would have, or if there was some horrific event that happened. And so I know there are fire hydrants back in the backside of that building. I know you're putting a firebox there. So to tell me that there's no sense that alleyway is a fire alleyway, then there shouldn't need to be a firebox there, or whatever that new creation that you're going to be adding on the back. Then if that is not something that the fire department needs to access and get to, then let's stop the charade there too, and let's stop building that addition that you're planning on adding.
David, that box that's going in the back, this is Jason, is a fire pump house to service the fire suppression system within the building. Just, that's what that's for.
So the fire, so if there's a fire on the actual hospital building, like where there's construction going on, then there's no need to get fire trucks down there to address a fire on your side of that alleyway, then, is what you're telling me. You'll address it from the East Newton or the Albany Street approach then.
Correct. Correct.
So David, let me offer, look at, you're obviously a reasonable guy and you've had really good comments about this. I don't know the fire issue per se, specifically, but the issue with doing the construction in here, it would be unsafe. And the idea was to, Jason's been working on this, I think in hindsight, yes, I think everybody wished that maybe this would have been discussed in beginning of December, but we were talking about, apparently we were talking about the vans. And that, I don't want to bring that back up, but with regard to this, you've got 4 months coming up where it's going to be accessible. I think we'll have a the idea was to have another meeting to hear out concerns like the fire issue, like the parking, like the people that rent spaces to tenants, and how that can be. Now, a new one that wasn't, I was new to us is, for me anyway, was this, tenants turning over on the bottom floor and having access. And as Gordon said, perhaps there's a way we can access that. My understanding is that and I understand you feel like you got burned on the van issue. So how do you know you're going to get parking? I think it is. I understand it's the real intent to work collaboratively and find alternative parking. Hopefully in that other garage, but I think many of you know that garage is getting sold in the next year. So can that be the answer for 11 months? I don't know. Is it the answer for 6 months? That has to,
The garage right across the
just
street.
one second, Marie, I'll finish.
Harrison.
Is if this team can find suitable alternative parking, work through some of these issues, and then nobody's saying it's not an inconvenience. I mean, and nobody said that it's an inconvenience to the project to have this shared right of way, easements or not, but I think we do. It behooves everybody to try and work through and get to that solution. The idea would be to have a meeting in probably 6 weeks with all these issues addressed, and then make agreements with each individual property owner as to what their compensation is for where alternative parking can be secured. But yeah, I know. I just know Jason's a good guy and he's been working really hard to try to find alternatives, but getting in there in a construction during construction and do the work is going to be hard. It can't be.
Can I interrupt you, please?
Yeah,
Marie, can I just say one other thing?
Sure, David, go ahead.
I think
You're
one of the
much more.
challenges that the Shattuck group needs to understand is you're now moving into the city where there's less space. I think the Shattuck has for years been in an area where they could do what they wanted because they were in an area where there was nothing but trees and space around them. And there has to be better coordination with your neighbors, with the community. And this, I think, just speaks so loudly how the group that's leading this, I think and Jason, I'm sure you did a great job and you're doing your job and you're trying to find the best way to get this job done. But you don't reach out to the community and understand the impacts that your decisions make on the community, because you've never had to do this, or the Shattuck has never had to do this before. And I think this speaks to the importance of there being really good open lines of communication, and also an understanding that there has to be negotiation. It can't be one-sided. And that's all I'll say.
Marie, go ahead.
I absolutely agree with David and everybody else. And it's that you haven't come in and talked to us about how we actually use our spaces. It's so clear from everybody, from Jason, from Asia, from everybody. Not from Jason, from Joseph. Jason, I respect you a lot. But this has always been a fire alley on every diagram that you guys have presented to us. It's been a fire alley. And then you say, no, it's not a fire alley, but really it is. But we're not talking about a month or 6 weeks. You're talking about a year. That's a whole different issue. And, we've been dealing with National Grid projects all over the city. why don't you take their kind of framework? They dig up and then they put it back, they cover it up, and then the next day they dig it up and they cover it up. It's like they do a night by night thing or day by day thing. You know, it's crazy because it takes a lot longer, but the idea that you have to close that alleyway for a year, I think there has to be another way. You think about it. And I live right across from the dental building in the back. That's my bedroom window. I looked at it, I saw how they put up that facade. It was just a little boom thing. It didn't take a lot of space. You could figure something out. You know, it's a way to, maybe it's going to take longer, but a year, you know, preventing access to that is really, I think, very unreasonable. And that's what I like to say.
Thank you, Marie. So we're at 7:20. We try to hold these things to 90 minutes or so. Let me just summarize what I think people have said in the on these two major points regarding the loss of the alley access for almost a year and the van parking situation. So with respect to the alley access, I think what people have said is, A, there's concern around just the safety aspect of it, especially in the event of something like a fire or people needing to, you know, exit their building to the rear for some reason in an emergency, and the narrowness of the walkway, the inability of fire apparatus to use the alley at all in this scenario that's being described. That's one big concern. Secondly, there are a set of issues that it seems like the state did not anticipate regarding the fact that blocking the alley for this period would interfere with people's ability to access garden apartment units, things like moving furniture in and out, or things like replacing a water heater, that sort of a thing. And it also may cause people to run afoul of leases they have in terms of promises that were made to tenants. And so there's a question of how to mitigate that. And then there's the need, and Asya, you said this, that the state needs to get a census of all of the parking spaces that exist, and with an eye toward understanding how many alternative spaces they would need to secure. So somehow we're going to have a process whereby residents compile that information and feed it into some central place. And Asya, is there what's your proposal for that? Are people supposed to be funneling that information to one of your people, or how's that going to work?
Gordon, can you speak to that briefly?
So we would suggest that we run that through the website to get started, and then we probably would start reaching out on it one by one basis to understand, because it's a private matter between each tenant. So one tenant may have 3 cars, another may have 2, some have none. So our thought was to start to reach out on a case by case basis to each unit.
But you'll put something to start with. You'll put something on the website whereby residents can input their information. Is that right?
Yes.
And can somebody drop the website into the chat so everybody can see? And then presumably you'll also do door-to-door outreach, because of course not everybody participates in these meetings.
Yeah, we collected, I think earlier we collected when we did the research on the vibration monitoring. I think we have a contact for each owner.
Okay, and you'll send mail and that sort of thing.
Yes.
Okay.
And also, David, I'd like to make the commitment, come down and meet with people to have these conversations in person.
Okay. So we'll schedule, so you'll come down and we'll have another meeting in the alley, so to speak. We had one.
Yeah, I'm happy to commit to that. I'd like to meet people face to face and continue these discussions.
Okay, so we'll at our end work to arrange for that in the next month or so.
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay. I'll email this group around that. And then there was the question of the preferred offsite parking, and I know and just if people could sort of continue to articulate what their preferences would be. And again, maybe can they plug that? Can they, to the extent people have preferences, should they put that through the website?
I think that makes sense.
That'd be very helpful. Thank you.
We talked to, obviously, when we did some of the 1 day, 2 day drilling in the alley previously, we made arrangements with Boston Medical Center because they're leasing that garage, but their lease runs out in October. So that's why we don't have the plan, because I have to connect with Leggett McCall, who actually owns the property, and find out who their new tenant may be, and are they fully occupying the office and fully occupying the garage. So that's why we don't have a plan today, because this property is changing over its lease holder in October. So we have collected a list of area parking that we're doing our due diligence so we can provide that data the next time we talk.
And so, so today is February 15th. You're proposing to close the alley on or about June 1st. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So therefore, can we come to some clarity about where the alternative is within the next 30 days? Is that?
We plan to have that for our next meeting. So I think we said we try to get together in 4 to 6 weeks, right? I think it's 6 weeks.
Yeah, well, somebody said in the chat, and I think we will all agree with this, that given these developments and also just the tempo of the project now, that we need more frequent meetings. And so maybe they need to be I think they maybe need to be once a month.
That's possible.
And so let's talk in terms of meeting approximately 4 weeks from now. Does that work?
I think let's aim for that, and we can also have individual conversations before that time, and we'll work with you to schedule that.
Okay. Let me on the subject of the van parking. Okay. What I took away at least is that there's no support for your proposal among the abutters, and there's little, if any, acceptance. And I also took away from you that you represent that it's kind of the final situation, and that there's no further alternatives to be explored or to be considered on the side of the state. So those are obviously contradictory, but that's what I took away. With regard to factual questions, people asked whether the backup alarms are on these vans, and you said you would check into that. There was somebody asked that next time somebody from the design team be present, because he made the point that in prior meetings there had been a lot of emphasis on the idea that part of this whole point was to bring a sense of greenery and sort of an improved physical presence to this very urban part of the South End. There was, again, without suggesting that there was acceptance for the idea of the van parking, there was a question around whether mitigation would have been possible in the form of a wall. So it seems like when we next speak, if you could be prepared to have somebody who's able to speak to that. And those were the things I heard with regard to the vans. Does anybody want to add to that?
You might have mentioned this and I'm sorry, but just a presentation of what were the alternate locations that we looked at.
Oh, yes, right, exactly. And why according to the state, or according to the Department of Corrections, at least, those were not acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
Right, thank you for because that was an important concern. I see Cinda has her hand raised, so why don't we say, Cinda, you all have the last word.
I think you did a great job, David, of summarizing this meeting. I just want to make sure that they understand that part, we are still going to be fighting the placement of those parking bans. We still do not want them.
Yes, yeah, no,
okay,
no,
but you did a great job.
I think that was very clear, and I think that, as I said, I don't think I heard any support whatsoever for this proposal on the part of anybody who's in the butter.
Okay, you did a great job of summarizing. Just want you to know that.
Okay, thank you,
David. I want to echo the fact that you've done a great job moderating this meeting. There's a lot of really contentious issues. There's a lot of impact to the direct abutters. It's a big project, but David, you've done a really good job facilitating this. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Let me just, somebody else put in the chat, David M, and this was right too. We would like for somebody from the Department of Corrections to explain directly why these proposed alternatives, which the rest of the state team seemed to think were viable up until right now, up until recently, why from the standpoint of the DOC, these aren't acceptable.
Thank you. We'll reach out to the DOC and see what we can do.
Okay. All right. So we will reconvene in about a month. Right?
Yeah, I think we should work towards that. Yep.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
See ya. Good night.